Welcome back. Today I have Dr. An, who's here on behalf of Hoag, but he's going to be talking to us about the Mary and Dick Allen Diabetes Center. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and thank you for being here. Now, we have your title as endocrinologist and program director.
That's
so
correct.
As we were talking before the segment, we were talking about what an endocrinologist is, and I found it very interesting that you had a really interesting answer. So go ahead and tell me your answer.
Yeah, so you might have come into endocrinology to cover various different pathologies or disease states.
Right.
It really seems like a grab bag if I listed out what endocrinologists manage, because it's technically the study of hormones.
Okay.
And hormones are involved in many different organ systems. So the list of things includes bone health, like osteoporosis, diabetes, which insulin is the hormone that manages diabetes, thyroid hormone. So there's a ton of different disease states that we manage as endocrinologists.
Right, and I certainly didn't know that, because as I had mentioned, it was more of a bone issue that we had come into an endocrinologist. So diabetes, we're going to talk today about the center. Tell me a little about some of the services that the Diabetes Center has.
Yeah, so the Mary and Dick Allen Diabetes Center is primarily an education resource for the community and physicians in the community. Historically, that's kind of the basis of it. There are dietitians, there are diabetes educators, there are RNs that are all specialized in talking about diabetes with patients. So we offer a lot of group classes as well. So the topics that we cover are diabetes self-management. So if someone is newly diagnosed or wants to kind of get a fundamental knowledge base of how to manage their diabetes, we have group classes for that. We also have something called the Diabetes Prevention Program for healthy lifestyles. So that's if someone is obese or has some risk factors for developing diabetes, they can kind of go to that class to learn how to prevent the progression to having diabetes. And also we have some community events there, like we have something called Sweet Success, and that there's a cooking class that takes place every month that's open to the community. In addition, we also have an endocrinologist, myself, that's on staff. And we also have a nurse practitioner who sees patients as well.
Now, are you involved in some of the educational process? Are you giving some of the talks?
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of oversee the curriculum, and also I participate in kind of teaching certain topics within the different series. We kind of pull whichever content expert we have. So for example, if there's a class on eating habits, we'll pull our dietitians. If there's a class on exercise, we might pull our CDE. If there's a class on medications, we might pull myself or a pharmacist to come talk to the audience.
Okay, so let's talk about the medications. So for instance, you mentioned insulin. Is that the only medication that's used for diabetes?
No. Well, I guess I should kind of take an aside here. So there's type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So for type 1 diabetes, people don't make insulin. So in that situation, they do need to be on insulin. So for type 1 diabetes, insulin really is the only option, or the primary option, I should say. Whereas with type 2 diabetes, which is what 90% of diabetes is, so the bulk of your audience has type 2 diabetes, insulin is not the only option. It could be one of the options, but it doesn't usually have to be the first, second, or third line option. And that's where things get really interesting, and there's been a lot of advancements in medications recently.
So give me an example.
Yeah, so there are a lot of, you probably see all these ads on TV all the time for things like Victoza and Trulicity and Jardiance and Invokana, and there basically have been two real significant classes of medications that have come out in the past 10 years. And they really approach and help people manage diabetes in ways that offer benefits that insulin does not. So for example, insulin, one of its dirty secrets is that it can contribute to weight gain, which nobody really enjoys. But the two classes of medications that I talk about, or that I talked about previously, both help with weight loss. And in addition, those two classes of medications also help reduce cardiovascular events, such as heart attacks and strokes. So these are, side benefits that people with diabetes and our older patients really do well on. And I think a lot of times people aren't aware that there are these options available on the market.
So obviously you take a look at the makeup of the individual, how much they weigh or what some of their issues are, and then you prescribe according to that, correct?
Definitely, and I can't really emphasize that enough, that therapy should be individualized. So for certain people, one class of medications is better. So one of the classes that I just talked about, which includes Victoza and Trulicity, those are injectable medications. So as you might imagine, some people aren't thrilled about taking an injection. But some people really want that weight loss benefit. So when someone sees an endocrinologist like myself, a lot of that is really teasing out what the patient's priorities are, whether they're okay with taking an injectable, what their beliefs are about insulin. So there's so many different options. I kind of liken it to a tool belt. We have like a toolkit ahead in front of us, and based on the patient's preferences and prior experiences, we want to pick the best tool for them, because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right, right. And let me ask you, if you are diagnosed with diabetes, is there a turnaround? Like, could you actually not have it at some point?
I'm glad you asked that. It's a very tricky question. So a lot of times I'll be asked, can it be cured? Can it be reversed? And in the end, I think it really comes down to terminology. Okay. So you can definitely get to the point where you're no longer on medications, where your blood sugar control is back to where it would be if you did not have diabetes.
Okay.
But in that situation, I still don't like to necessarily say it's cured, because you still have to eat a certain way, you still have to make certain lifestyle choices. So it's not like you can go back and eat and live the way that you did 20 years ago when you were not eating healthily. You still have to make good choices, but you definitely can get to a point where you're not on medications and your blood sugar control is fantastic. So whether or not you want to call that reversed or cured, it's a little bit of semantics. I kind of liken it to my patients to alcoholism. Some people say, I've been sober for 30 years, but I'm still an alcoholic. It's kind of the same way with diabetes. You can be totally controlled off medications, but you still have that predisposition.
And those education classes will help somebody realize that, right?
Definitely.
Perfect. Okay, good. All right. So how is our technology currently, or what we see down the line, helping people with diabetes?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really exciting, once similar to kind of the medications, there's been a lot of advancements in technology. So you're probably familiar with, you and your audience are probably familiar with people that have to check their blood sugars. It's kind of a pain point, literally, because they have to prick their finger, and it's not fun, and it's not the most hygienic or pleasant to your guests if you have friends over. But there's a new type of technology called continuous glucose monitoring, and it's starting to become a lot more widespread. You might have seen people walking around the neighborhood with like a little gray disc that kind of sits on their upper arm or abdomen. And what happens is it's a little sensor that you wear. You wear it for about 10 days, and it basically automatically samples your blood sugar every 5 to 15 minutes, depending on which brand you use. And to check your blood sugar, you don't have to prick your fingers anymore. There are two main products. One is called the Dexcom G6, and the other one is called the Abbott Freestyle Libre. The Freestyle Libre, which is going to be more accessible to your patient population because it's a little bit more affordable, so insurance is like that. But what happens is you can basically grab a special device and you wave it over that sticker that you're wearing, and it'll automatically tell you your blood sugar, the direction that it's going, and it'll give you a graph of your last 8 hours. Without having to prick your fingers.
So you just do that once a day?
It has an 8-hour like looping memory, kind of like imagine if it was like a surveillance camera. So you do have to scan it if you don't want to have any gaps, at least every 8 hours. But the nice thing is you can actually scan it through your clothes. So if you're if you're eating at a restaurant, you don't have to bust out your device and expose your friends to your blood. You can just kind of swipe like this and look at the meter, and it'll tell you what your blood sugar is.
Is the meter big or is it small?
It's about the size of a standard glucose meter, so maybe kind of like those stopwatches that you'll see refs use. It's about that size. Like fits in the palm of your hand, but it's not so small that other people won't see it.
But it still could fit in the pocket or in a purse or something like that.
Definitely.
Oh, that's really that's great. Now you don't have to prick yourself. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. And then what are some ways that seniors could save money on their prescriptions or some of their supplies? I know we just mentioned that insurance companies like it when things cost less money, but that always isn't the case.
Yeah, and it's really challenging for my patients that are seniors because most of them are on Medicare or on some sort of government insurance. And unfortunately, the way that pharmaceutical companies are saving money and maybe gaming the system is using coupons. But unfortunately, coupons are not eligible for patients that are receiving Medicare. So that's a really big limitation for most of my patients. So my number one tip would really be, it's kind of obvious, but really tell your provider that your medications are costing a lot of money. Because for the providers, we actually don't really know, because some of our patients, their insurance, their Medicare will cover it, and they have a $10 copay. Whereas some of my patients will be stuck in the donut hole or with a different type of insurance where they're paying $500 for that same medication.
Right.
And really, $500 a month is not in anybody's budget, or
No.
99.9% of the people.
Right.
It's not in my budget.
Right.
So when my patient tells me that they're paying, $300, $400, $500 a month for a medication, we'll have to try to play with that and either find another tool that might be more affordable, or try to find a different generic competitor.
Okay.
Or just change up the toolbox.
Okay.
Because there are options that are definitely cheaper out of pocket,
Okay.
and there are options that are more expensive. So while coupons are not available, there are definitely other options that might be more affordable that still have some benefits. In addition, I would say a lot of doctors have samples as well.
Okay.
And while it's not meant to, literally it's meant to be a sample,
Right.
it's at least a great way for you to try different medications without having to invoke your insurance every time and have to do the paperwork and the prior authorizations. So I would really say to work with your provider,
Okay.
because a lot of times your provider just does not realize that you're paying this much money.
Yeah, and they're seeing so many patients a day, they don't necessarily know. So that is a really good tip, to be able to talk to your physician.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you so much for the
Yeah, thank
information.
you for
I appreciate
having
it.
me.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
All right, thank you. And stay tuned. We'll be right back after this with the Senior Center.